The transport ship docked at Station Nexus 7 with a soft hiss of pressure equalization. Yoon Seo-yeon stood near the exit hatch, her single bag hanging from her shoulder. Inside that bag, wrapped carefully in cloth, was her grandfather's old training journal. Everything else she owned could be replaced. That journal could not. She stepped onto the station and took her first breath of recycled air. It tasted different from Earth. Cleaner, but somehow empty. Like someone had removed all the imperfections that made air feel alive. The Valori Combat Academy had accepted only 3 humans in its entire history. Seo-yeon was the third. The first had dropped out after 2 months. The second had graduated but barely, finishing at the bottom of his class. Nobody expected much from the third. She walked through the main corridor, following the glowing directional signs toward the academy entrance. Other species moved around her. Tall Kavathi with their 4 powerful arms. Graceful Velith, who seemed to float rather than walk. Stocky Brenner, whose skin looked like living stone. They all towered over her. At 5'4", Seo-yeon was small even by human standards. Nobody looked at her twice. Humans were still new to the galactic community. Most species considered them primitive, lucky to have stumbled onto faster-than-light travel when they did. Earth was seen as a curiosity, nothing more. The academy building rose before her like a monument to warfare. Its walls displayed the emblems of a dozen species, each one representing centuries of martial tradition. There was no human emblem. Not yet. She registered at the front desk, received her room assignment and training schedule, and made her way to the dormitory. Her room was small but functional. A bed, a desk, a storage unit. The window looked out at the stars. She stood there for a long moment, watching distant suns burn in the darkness. Then she unpacked her grandfather's journal and placed it on the desk the next morning. Seo-yeon reported to the weapons hall for her first training session. The room was massive, with high ceilings and walls lined with practice weapons of every design. Students were already warming up, spinning staffs and testing grips. Most of them were Kavathi, their forearms moving in perfect coordination. A few Velith practiced in one corner, their movements elegant and precise. Seo-yeon walked to the weapons rack and selected a standard plasma staff. It was heavier than what she had trained with on Earth, but the balance was good. She found an empty space on the training floor and began her warm-up routine. That was when the whispers started. She heard them even though they were not speaking her language. The translation implant in her ear converted everything to Korean, her native tongue. The Kavathi students were talking about her grip. "Look at her hands," one of them said. "She's holding it completely wrong. Maybe humans do not have proper training programs," another replied. "They have only been in space for 60 years. What do they know about combat?" Seo-yeon kept her expression neutral. She had expected this. Her grandfather had warned her about it many times. When you enter their space, he had told her, they will judge you before you speak a single word. Let them. Your actions will speak louder than their opinions. A large Kavathi male walked toward her. His name was Dreth, and even among his own species, he was considered exceptional. All 4 of his arms were thick with muscle, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. He stopped directly in front of her, forcing her to look up at him. The height difference was almost comical. He was nearly 7 feet tall. "Did Earth not teach you proper form?" he asked loudly, making sure everyone in the hall could hear. Even hatchlings know better than to grip a weapon like that. Seo-yeon looked at him calmly. She said nothing. Dreth waited for a response. When none came, his amusement turned to irritation. He leaned closer. "I asked you a question. Human. My grip is different," Seo-yeon said quietly. "That does not mean it is wrong." Laughter erupted from the watching students. Dreth smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We will see about that," he said. "We will see how long you last here with your different grip." He walked away, and the training session continued. Xiao Yian returned to her warm-up routine as if nothing had happened. She adjusted her feet, settled into her stance, and waited. The main doors opened, and silence fell over the hall. The instructor who entered was unlike anyone Xiao Yian had ever seen. He was Velith, but unlike the others of his species, he was not graceful or elegant. His body was covered in scars. One of his eyes was artificial, glowing with a faint blue light. He walked with a slight limp, evidence of old injuries that had never fully healed. This was Master Kale Varn, the head instructor, a veteran of the Boundary Wars, a legend. He moved through the hall slowly, observing each student. His expression revealed nothing. When he reached the Kovati group, he gave a small nod of approval. When he passed the Velith, he made a minor correction to one student's stance. Then he reached ECO-YEON. He stopped. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. His eyes moved from her face to her hands to her feet. He studied her grip on the staff with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. So-YEON did not move. She held her position exactly as her grandfather had taught her. Something changed in Varn's expression. It was subtle, barely visible, but it was there. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. He blinked once slowly, then continued walking as if nothing had happened. But throughout the rest of the session, his eyes kept returning to her. Every time she moved, every time she shifted her weight, he was watching. The other students noticed. They whispered among themselves, wondering what the human had done to attract the master's attention. Xiao Yian noticed too. She did not know what it meant, but she filed the information away in her mind. Her grandfather had taught her to pay attention to details. Small things could change everything. When the session ended, she returned her staff to the rack and left the hall without speaking to anyone. She had 8 months of training ahead of her. 8 months to prove that Earth belonged among the stars. She thought of her grandfather's words, written in the journal that now sat on her desk. They will underestimate you. Let them. Your survival does not depend on their respect. ECO-YEON walked back to her quarters alone. Tomorrow would bring more mockery, more challenges, more tests. She was ready for all of it. 2 weeks passed at the academy, and nothing changed. Every morning, Xiao Yian reported to training. Every morning, the other students laughed at her grip. Every morning, her scores were marked down for improper form, despite completing every single objective. She never complained. She never argued. She simply kept training. The nights were her own. After dinner, when other students gathered in common rooms to socialize, Xiao Yian returned to her quarters and read her grandfather's journal. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with handwritten notes in Korean. Some entries were technical, describing combat techniques and their applications. Others were personal, recording thoughts and memories from a life spent fighting. One entry, dated 32 years ago, caught her attention again and again. They think we are fragile. Her grandfather had written, they see our soft skin and our small bodies, and they assume we are weak. They do not understand. Earth is not a gentle world. Everything on our planet is trying to kill us. The gravity pulls at our bones. The sun burns our skin. The water hides predators. The air carries disease. We evolved on a world that wanted us dead. That is why we fight the way we do. Not for elegance. Not for beauty. For survival. SEO-YEON closed the journal and looked out her window at the stars. Her grandfather, Yoon Tae-jun, had been a Republic of Korea Marine before becoming one of Earth's first off-world security consultants. He had spent 20 years working with alien species, protecting cargo ships and mining stations across 3 systems. He had seen things that most humans could not imagine. He had also survived things that most humans could not. Survived. She thought about his lessons. The way he had taught her to grip a weapon, thumbs positioned differently than any galactic standard, wrists angled in what the Korvathi considered an amateur mistake. But there was nothing amateur about it. That grip was designed for endurance. It was designed to hold on when your hands were slippery with sweat and blood. It was designed to keep fighting when your muscles were failing and your bones were aching. The Korvathi grip was designed for forearms. The Velith grip was designed for their flexible joints. Every species had developed techniques suited to their own bodies, and humans had developed techniques suited to a world that never stopped trying to kill them. The next day, during a rest period between training sessions, a Velith student approached Seo Yeon. Her name was Nira, and she was small for her species. Her movements were quick and nervous, like a bird uncertain of its surroundings. "You are the human," Nira said. "The one everyone talks about." SEO-Y. Aeon looked at her. "I am the human." "Yes." Nira sat down beside her without asking permission. "I am also different," she said. "My species considers me too small for combat training. Too soft. They think I should have pursued diplomacy or science instead. Why did you not?" "Because I wanted to prove them wrong." Nira paused. "Is that why you are here?" Seo Yeon considered the question. "Partly," she said. "But mostly I am here because this is what I was trained to do. My grandfather prepared me for this. Nira nodded slowly. "They mock your grip," she said. "Every day. I see them laughing. Why do you not change it? If you adjust it to match their standards, they would stop." Seo looked at her hands. They were calloused from years of training, rough in ways that no other species' hands were rough. "Because this grip was designed to keep fighting when your hands are wet with blood and your muscles are failing," she said. There was not something changed in Nira's expression. Understanding, perhaps, or respect. She did not ask any more questions about the grip. They became friends after that. Not close friends, not yet, but allies in a place where neither of them truly belonged. Meanwhile, Master Vorn continued to push Seo Yeon harder than any other student. He assigned her extra conditioning work after regular training sessions, running through the station's gravity variable sections, climbing walls designed to test species with natural claws, carrying weights that seemed pointless because no combat situation would require such strength that the other students thought he was punishing her. They whispered that the master was trying to make her quit. Seo-Yeon knew better. She recognized the training. It was exactly what her grandfather had described in his journal. Endurance building, mental fortitude, the slow process of preparing a body to fight beyond its limits. She did not question Warren's methods. She simply did the work. One evening, Nira came to Seo Yeon's quarters with a datapad in her hands. Her eyes were wide with excitement. "I found something," she said, "in the old news archives. Something about humans. Seo-Y Eomen invited her inside." Nira sat on the edge of the bed and activated the datapad. A news article appeared on the screen, dated 30 years ago. It was about the Boundary Wars, specifically about a mining station called Outpost 17. Raiders had attacked it, seeking the valuable ore stored in its holds. The station's defenses had failed quickly. Over 200 civilian workers were trapped inside, but a small human security team had been present. Just 8 people. They had held the station for 11 days against a force of more than 300 raiders. They had used every trick, every trap, every desperate strategy they could devise. They had fought without sleep. They had fought while injured. They had fought until rescue finally arrived. Only 2 of them survived. but they had saved everyone else. Nira pointed to one of the names listed among the survivors. Sergeant Yoon Tae-jun, she read aloud. She looked at Seo Yeon. Your family name is Yoon.co-Yeon stared at the screen. She had known her grandfather was a veteran. She had known he had seen combat, but he had never told her the full story. He had never explained exactly what he had done during those 11 days. She reached for the data pad and enlarged the photograph attached to the article. It showed a young man, barely older than she was now, standing in the ruins of a corridor. His face was bloody. His uniform was torn. In his hands, he held a weapon, and his grip was exactly the same as hers. My grandfather, Seo Yeon said quietly. Naor was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Now I understand why you will not change. Seo Yeon looked at her. What do you mean? Nira stood and walked to the door. You are not just carrying a technique, she said. You are carrying a legacy. She left without another word. Seo-Y-Eon sat alone in her quarters, staring at the photograph of a young man who would one day become her grandfather. He had held that station for 11 days. He had refused to let go, refused to give up, refused to die. And now she was here, carrying his lessons across the stars. She opened his journal again and found the entry she was looking for. They will always underestimate you, he had written. Let them. Your survival is not dependent on their respect. Seo-Y-Eon closed the journal and went to sleep. Tomorrow would bring more training, more mockery, more tests, but now she understood exactly why she was here. The equipment hall was empty when Seo Yeon entered, or at least it appeared empty. She had come to check out a training dummy for solo practice, something she did 3 times a week to work on techniques that the regular sessions did not cover. The lights were dimmed, set to their evening mode. Shadows filled the corners of the room. Rows of practice weapons lined the walls, their surfaces gleaming faintly in the low light. She was halfway to the storage units when she heard footsteps behind her. 4 sets of footsteps. Heavy. Corva the. She stopped walking, but did not turn around. Her heart rate increased slightly, but her breathing remained steady. Her grandfather had taught her long ago how to control fear. Fear was useful. Panic was not. The human comes to train alone, a familiar voice said. Dreth stepped into the light, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. 3 other Komvathi males flanked him, all of them larger than her, all of them watching her with expressions that promised trouble. I am here to use the training equipment, Seo Yeon said calmly. The hall is open to all students during evening hours. Dreth smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Yes, it is open to all students. But perhaps some students should not be here at all. He walked toward her slowly, each footstep deliberate. His companions spread out, blocking the exits. They had planned this. They had been waiting for her. You embarrass us, Dreth continued. Every day, you stand on our training floor with your wrong grip and your wrong stance and your primitive techniques. You make the academy look foolish for accepting you. Seo-Yeon remained still. I have not broken any rules, she said. I have not insulted anyone. I have simply trained. Your existence here is an insult. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the patterns in his skin, the scars from previous fights. He was a skilled warrior. She had watched him in training sessions. His technique was excellent, his reflexes sharp, his strength overwhelming. But technique and strength were not everything. We want to see what humans are really made of, Dreth said. A proper spar. No instructors. No rules. Just you and me. Seo-Yeon shook her head. Unsanctioned fights violate academy regulations. I will not participate. Dreth's eyes narrowed. You refuse? Are all humans cowards? I refuse because fighting you outside of official sessions has no purpose. It proves nothing and risks everything. For a moment, Dreth seemed uncertain. He had expected her to either accept the challenge or cower in fear. Her calm refusal was neither. It was something he did not know how to handle. Then his uncertainty turned to anger. He moved fast, reaching for the staff she was carrying. One of his upper arms knocked it from her hands, while a lower arm shoved her backward. "Pick it up," he commanded. "Fight me properly." SEO-YEON did not pick up the staff. She did not retreat. She simply stood there, watching him with those quiet, observant eyes that had unsettled so many of her instructors. Dreth's anger grew. He reached for her again, intending to grab her shoulder and throw her across the room. That was his mistake. Seo-Yan moved. It happened in 3 seconds. When Dreth's upper right hand came toward her, she did not try to block it. Instead, she stepped inside his reach, too close for his arms to generate power. Her left hand caught his wrist and redirected its momentum downward. Her right hand pressed against his elbow joint, using leverage instead of strength. His body followed his arm, twisting in a direction it was not designed to go. She hooked her foot behind his leg and shifted her weight. All 4 of his arms flailed, seeking balance that no longer existed. He hit the floor hard. Before he could recover, she had his right arms locked in a position that made movement impossible without causing serious damage to his joints. The hold was precise, controlled, designed to immobilize without injuring. His 3 companions stared in shock. None of them moved. They had never seen a Kovathi brought down so quickly, especially not by someone half his size. ECO-YEON held the position for exactly 2 seconds. Then she released him and stepped back. Dreth scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with humiliation and rage. His arms were uninjured, she had made sure of that, but his pride was destroyed. The other Korvathi had witnessed everything. She picked up her staff from the floor. "I'm going to leave now," she said quietly. "I suggest you do the same." She walked toward the exit. Nobody tried to stop her. The next morning, Seo-Yan was summoned to the disciplinary board. She stood in a small room with plain walls and a long table. 5 instructors sat behind that table, including Master Vaughn. Their expressions were serious. "A formal complaint has been filed against you," the lead instructor said. He was an elderly Brenner with stone-gray skin and eyes like polished obsidian. "You are accused of assaulting a fellow student." "I defended myself," Seo-Yan replied. "I was cornered by 4 students who blocked the exits and demanded an unsanctioned fight. The student in question claims otherwise. He says you attacked him without provocation." Seo-Yan did not argue. She knew how this worked. Dreth's family had connections. His father was a military commander with influence across 3 systems. Her word meant nothing against his. The board debated for nearly an hour. Some instructors wanted her expelled immediately. Others pointed out that she had no history of violent behavior and that her account was consistent with her character. Master Vaughn spoke last. He did not defend her directly. He simply stated facts. "The student shows no injuries," he said. "The hold used was designed to immobilize, not harm. This suggests control, not aggression. It was not enough to clear her name, but it was enough to keep her in the academy. You are hereby issued a formal warning," the lead instructor announced. "Any further incidents will result in immediate expulsion. You are dismissed." CO-YEON bowed and left the room. That night, alone in her quarters, she opened her grandfather's journal. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from frustration. She had done nothing wrong, and yet she had nearly lost everything. She found the passage she was looking for and read it slowly. "They will push you," her grandfather had written. They will test you. They will try to break you in ways that have nothing to do with combat. When that happens, you must remember why you are fighting. Not for glory, not for respect, for those who will come after you. Every time you endure, you make the path easier for the next human who walks it. SEO-YEON closed the journal and looked out her window at the stars. She had one warning left. One more mistake, and everything would be over. But she was not going to make that mistake. She was not going to give them the satisfaction of breaking her. She thought of her grandfather holding that mining station for 11 days. She thought of the choices he must have made, the pain he must have endured, the moments when giving up would have been easier than continuing. He had not given up. Neither would she. A week after the disciplinary hearing, Sayo Yan received an unexpected message on her datapad. It was from Master Varan. The message contained only a time and a location. 2,100 hours. Training Room 7. Training Room 7 was in the old section of the academy, a place that most students never visited. The corridors there were narrower, the lighting older, the walls marked with years of use that the newer sections did not show. She found the room at exactly 2,100 hours and entered. Varan stood in the center of the space, his back to her. The room was different from the main training halls. It felt personal somehow. Private. The walls were covered with artifacts. Old weapons, some of them damaged beyond use. Medals from campaigns she had only read about. Photographs of soldiers from a dozen species, posed together in the aftermath of battles that had shaped the galaxy. Close the door, Varan said without turning around. SEO-YEO and closed the door. VO. A Ren finally faced her. His scarred features were difficult to read, but there was something different in his expression tonight. Something almost vulnerable. Do you know why I asked you here? He said. No, sir. He gestured toward the wall of photographs. Look at these. Tell me what you see. CO-YEON moved closer to the images. They showed mixed species military units. Kovathi standing beside Velith. Brenner working alongside Myrith. The photographs were old, their colors slightly faded, but the faces were clear. Then she saw a. In one photograph, standing among aliens twice his size, was a young human man. He wore the uniform of an off-world security contractor. His face was unfamiliar, but his stance was not. His hands gripped a weapon in exactly the way her grandfather had taught her. She leaned closer and read the caption beneath the image. Outpost 17 Security Detail, it said. 3 weeks before the siege. That is your grandfather, Varan said quietly. Sergeant Yun Tae-Jun. Coyan turned to face him. You knew him? Varan walked to a chair and sat down heavily, as if the weight of memory was suddenly too much to carry standing. I knew him, he said. But not the way you might expect. He was silent for a long moment. Then he began to speak. I was young during the Boundary Wars. Foolish. I had grown up on a colony that had been exploited by the Central Systems for generations. When the raiders came recruiting, promising wealth and revenge against those who had wronged us, I believed them. He looked at the photograph on the wall. I was there at Outpost 17, he said. Not as a defender. As one of the raiders. Sayuyan felt something cold move through her chest. She had not expected this. Varan continued. We thought it would be easy. A mining station with minimal security. Over 200 workers and only 8 guards. The ore in those holds was worth more than my entire colony. He touched the scar that ran across his face. We were wrong. Those 8 humans held us for 11 days. We had 300 fighters. We had better weapons, better equipment, better numbers. But every time we breached a door, they had already prepared another trap. Every time we thought we had them cornered, they found another way to fight. His voice grew quieter. By the 9th day, we had lost nearly half our force. Not to combat alone, but to exhaustion, to fear, to the slow realization that we were not fighting ordinary opponents. We were fighting something that did not know how to stop. S0-YEON sat down across from him. What happened on the 11th day? Voron looked at her with his one real eye. We finally breached the main compartment. We were broken by then. Wounded, starving, desperate. We expected them to kill us all. We had given them every reason to. He paused. But your grandfather did not kill us. When we came through that door, weapons raised, ready to die, he offered us surrender. He said that we could lay down our arms and receive medical treatment alongside the civilians we had been trying to rob. Why would he do that? Voron shook his head slowly. I asked him the same question. I was bleeding from 3 wounds. I could barely stand. And this human, this small, fragile creature from a world we considered primitive, looked at me and said that killing us would not undo the damage we had caused. He said that mercy was not weakness. It was a choice that required more strength than revenge. He stood and walked back to the photograph. That choice changed my entire life. I abandoned the raiders. I spent years working to make amends for what I had done. Eventually, I became an instructor, hoping to teach others the discipline I had failed to learn myself. He turned to face her. When I saw your grip on the first day of training, I recognized it immediately. It is the same grip your grandfather used. The same stance. The same positioning. You carry his techniques in your body. Co-YEON felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. He never told me the full story, she said. He never explained what happened during those 11 days. He would not, Voron replied. Men like your grandfather do not seek glory. They simply do what needs to be done. He walked toward her. The galaxy thinks humans are young and weak and unrefined. They see your short history and your fragile bodies, and they assume you are inferior. They do not understand what survival on Earth required. They do not understand that your techniques were forged on a world where everything was trying to kill you. He stopped directly in front of her. Your grip is not wrong. It is designed to hold on when any other species would have let go. The extra conditioning I have been assigning you is not punishment. It is preparation. I am training you the way your grandfather trained himself, because I believe you have the same fire he carried. SEO-YEON looked up at him. What do you want me to do? Voron returned to his chair. I want to train you privately, he said. Not to change your style, to help you understand how to demonstrate its value when it matters. The other students will continue to mock you. Let them. When the time comes, you will show them exactly what Earthborn are capable of. He extended his hand toward her. It was a human gesture, one he must have learned from her grandfather 30 years ago. Do we have an agreement? SEO-YEON took his hand and shook it firmly. We do. That night, she returned to her quarters with a new understanding of why she was here. Her grandfather had shown mercy to an enemy who deserved none. That mercy had transformed a raider into an instructor. And now, 30 years later, that instructor was going to help her prove that humans belonged among the stars. She opened her grandfather's journal and found a passage she had read many times before. But now, the words carried a different weight. The strongest warriors are not those who defeat every enemy, he had written. They are those who choose when to fight and when to offer another path. Victory without mercy is hollow. Victory with mercy can change the world. SEO-YEON closed the journal and looked at the stars outside her window. Her grandfather had changed Voron's world with a single choice. Now it was her turn to carry that legacy forward. 3 months into her training, the Academy announced the annual endurance trials. The announcement came during morning assembly. delivered by the Academy Director herself. Every student listened in complete silence. This was the event that determined careers. The rankings from the endurance trials would follow each graduate for the rest of their lives. The trials were simple in concept, but brutal in execution. Teams of 4 would navigate Station Nexus 7's hazardous lower sectors, facing a series of combat and survival challenges over 3 days. The lower sectors had been sealed off decades ago due to structural failures and environmental hazards. They were perfect for testing students who thought they were ready for real-world deployment. Team formation began immediately after the announcement. Students rushed to find partners, seeking the strongest and most skilled among their peers. Alliances formed within minutes. The elite gathered together, leaving the rest to scramble for whatever remained. Nobody approached SEO-YEON. She stood alone near the edge of the assembly hall, watching the other students form their groups. She had expected this. After the incident with Dreth, most students wanted nothing to do with her. Some feared association with a troublemaker. Others simply did not believe she could contribute to a winning team. Nira found her first. "I will join you," the Velith said simply. She did not ask permission. She did not wait for an invitation. She simply stood beside Sejeon as if the decision had already been made. "You know what this means," Sejeon said. "Being on my team will hurt your ranking." Nira shrugged. "My ranking is already low. They consider me too small and too soft. Being on your team cannot make things much worse." 2 more students approached before the assembly ended. The first was a Kovathi named Torek. Unlike Dreth and the others of his species, Torek was not physically impressive. One of his upper arms had been damaged in an accident years ago. It functioned, but not at full capacity. Among the Kovathi, this made him defective. Among his peers, it made him invisible. "I heard you are forming a team," Torek said. He stood awkwardly, as if expecting rejection. "I would like to join." Seo Yen studied him. His damaged arm was obvious, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Whatever his physical limitations, his mind was clearly strong. "You are welcome," she said. The fourth member was a Myrith named Vel. The Myrith were known for their unusual cognitive patterns. They processed information differently than most species, often appearing slow or confused in normal conversation. But Vel had a gift for pattern recognition that most instructors fail to appreciate. "I analyze well," Vel said in their halting speech pattern. "Others say I am slow. I am not slow. I am thorough. We need thorough," Seo Yeon replied. "Welcome to the team." And so the team was formed. A human with a wrong grip. A Velith who was too soft. A Kovathi who was damaged. A Myrith who was too slow. Dreth's team, by contrast, was stacked with the Academy's elite. 4 Kovathi warriors, each one selected for their perfect scores and flawless technique. During the week of preparation before the trials, they publicly predicted that they would finish first, while Seo Yan's team would not finish at all. SEO-YEON ignored them. She had work to do. Every evening, she gathered her team in an empty training room and taught them what her grandfather had taught her. Not advanced combat techniques. Something more fundamental. She taught them about resource management. How to conserve energy when others were wasting it. How to measure supplies and plan consumption over extended periods. She taught them about rotating rest schedules. How to ensure that someone was always alert while others recovered. How to function effectively on minimal sleep. She taught them about communication systems. Simple signals that could convey complex information quickly. Methods of coordination that did not require speaking. And she taught them about the concept of good enough. Most species train for perfection, she explained. They believe that anything less than optimal is failure. But humans learned long ago that perfection is a luxury. Sometimes the best solution is not the perfect one. It is the one that keeps you alive long enough to find a better one. Tarek nodded slowly. His damaged arm had taught him similar lessons. Perfect was not always possible. The trials began on a cold morning. All participating teams gathered at the entrance to the lower sectors. The massive doors had not been opened in years. When they finally groaned apart, a wave of stale air rushed out, carrying the smell of dust and forgotten spaces. Dreth's team entered first, moving with confidence and speed. Other teams followed, eager to establish early leads. Co Yan held her team back. "We are in no hurry," she said. "Let them waste their energy on the first challenges. We will be moving when they are resting." The first segment was a navigation challenge through a depressurized section of the station. Teams had to move through corridors with limited oxygen supplies, reaching checkpoints before their reserves ran out. Most teams rushed. They ran through the corridors, burning through oxygen at alarming rates. Several students collapsed from hypoxia and had to be rescued. Even Dreth's team finished with nearly empty tanks and multiple members showing signs of oxygen deprivation. Co Yin's team moved slowly. They walked instead of running. They paused at regular intervals to rest and reduce their oxygen consumption. They marked safe paths for potential emergencies. They finished last in that segment, but they were the only team with no injuries and full supplies remaining. On the second day, everything changed. Co Yin's team was navigating a flooded section of the lower sectors when their communication devices picked up emergency signals. Somewhere ahead, multiple teams were in trouble. A structural failure had occurred. Water was flooding into a sealed compartment, and 3 teams were trapped inside. Among them was Dreth's team. The trial administrators were debating whether to call for rescue. It would take time. Perhaps too much time. Cyan stopped walking. She looked at her team. Their eyes met hers. "If we continue the trial," Nira said slowly, "we will gain ground on everyone who is trapped." Tarek nodded. "We could finish in the top 3. Maybe higher." Vel tilted their head. "The water is rising. Pattern analysis suggests they have approximately 40 minutes before the situation becomes critical." Co Yan was silent for a long moment. Then she made her choice. "We are not continuing the trial," she said. "We are going to help them." Nira blinked. "That will disqualify us. We will lose everything." Co-Yon shook her head. "There is no competition if they are dead." She started walking toward the emergency signals. "Come on. We have work to do." Her team followed without another word. The flooding section was chaos. When Co Yan's team arrived, they found nearly a dozen students pressed against the upper walls of a large chamber. Water had already risen past waist height and was climbing steadily. Emergency lights flickered red, casting strange shadows across the panicked faces of those trapped inside. Kovati students were the most affected. Their species had an ancient, instinctive fear of drowning. Something in their evolutionary history made submersion one of their deepest terrors. Several of them were frozen, unable to move, barely able to breathe. Among them was Dreth. He clung to a structural beam with all 4 arms, his eyes wide with a fear that Co Yan had never seen in him before. The warrior who had mocked her, threatened her, tried to break her, was now paralyzed by something he could not fight. Co Yan did not hesitate. "Listen to me," she shouted over the rush of water. Her voice cut through the chaos with a clarity that surprised even her. "I need everyone to focus. We are going to get you out, but you need to stay calm and follow instructions." Nobody argued. Nobody questioned why a human was giving orders. They simply listened. She turned to her team. "Torek, I need you at that collapsed beam. Your strength can brace it and prevent further collapse. Can you do that?" Torek looked at the beam. It was massive, partially fallen, pressing against the wall in a way that threatened to bring more of the ceiling down. His damaged arm would make the task difficult, but not impossible. "I can do it," he said. Good. Nira, you are the smallest and most flexible. There are students trapped in that corner, behind the debris. You are the only one who can reach them. Get them to higher ground. Nira was already moving before Fayon finished speaking. Her small size, the very thing her species considered a weakness, was now her greatest advantage. "Vel, I need your pattern recognition. Study the water flow. Find me the drainage points. There must be emergency vents somewhere in this section. If we can open them, we can slow the flooding." Vel's eyes moved rapidly, processing the movement of water, the architecture of the space, the subtle currents that indicated where the liquid was coming from and where it might be directed. "Northwest corner," Vel said. "There is a maintenance panel. Behind it, emergency drainage controls. The pattern suggests they were sealed during the original evacuation." "Perfect." Co Yan pointed at two Vela students who were still mobile. "You two. Go with Vel. Help them open that panel." They obeyed without question. Co-Y-EON herself dove into the water. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and painful. Human bodies were not designed for extended submersion in freezing temperatures. Her muscles would begin to cramp within minutes. Hypothermia would follow shortly after. She did not care. She swam toward the first trapped student, a young Brenner whose heavy body had sunk to the floor when he lost his grip on the wall. She grabbed him under the arms and kicked upward, fighting against his weight, pulling him toward a stable platform where others could help him climb. Then she went back, again and again. She dove into that freezing water. She pulled out students who could not swim. She guided those who could toward safety. She shouted instructions that somehow cut through the panic, organizing the chaos into something manageable. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The water was still rising, but slower now. Vel had found the drainage controls, and the emergency vents were pulling water away, almost as fast as it was entering. But not everyone was safe yet. Dreth was still frozen against his beam, unable to move, unable to respond to any instruction. The water had risen to his chest. In another few minutes, it would reach his face. Co Yan swam toward him. When she reached him, she could see the terror in his eyes. This was not the Dreth who had cornered her in the equipment hall. This was not the warrior who had mocked her grip and demanded she fight him. This was a frightened young man facing his deepest fear. "Dreth," she said firmly. "Look at me." His eyes found hers. "I am going to get you out," she said. "But I need you to let go of that beam." He shook his head frantically. His forearms tightened their grip until his knuckles went pale. "Listen to me. The water is still rising. If you stay here, you will drown. But if you let go, I will pull you to safety. I promise. You are too small," he managed to say. His voice was barely a whisper. "You cannot carry me." SEO-YEON reached out and placed her hand on his upper arm. The contact seemed to steady him slightly. "I am not going to carry you," she said. "I am going to guide you. You are going to swim. Your body knows how, even if your mind is telling you otherwise. Trust me." For a long moment, Dreth did not move. Then, slowly, one arm at a time, he released his grip on the beam. Co Yan grabbed his hand and began to pull. The water was at his shoulders now. She kicked hard, fighting against the cold, fighting against her own exhausted muscles. Something caught on Dreth's leg. Debris from the collapsed ceiling tangled around his ankle. He could not move. SEO-YEON dove under the water. The cold was absolute. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. But she found the debris and began to work it loose, using her hands to pry apart the twisted metal. Her grip did not slip. Not once, The grip that had been designed for blood-slicked weapons, for fighting when muscles failed and bones ached, held firm against the freezing water and the sharp edges of broken metal. She freed his leg and surfaced, gasping for air. Together, they made it to the platform where the other students waited. Hands reached down to pull Dreth up. Hands reached down to pull her up. By the time the rescue teams arrived, everyone was safe. Co Yeon sat on the platform, shivering uncontrollably. Her core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. Someone wrapped an emergency blanket around her shoulders, but she barely felt it. A medical officer approached her. "Human, you need treatment immediately. Your body temperature is critical. SEO-Y. EON shook her head. Not until I know everyone is accounted for. She looked around the chamber, counting faces, matching them against her mental list of who had been trapped. When she was satisfied that no one had been left behind, she finally allowed herself to be taken to the medical station. On the way out, she passed Dreth. He was sitting against the wall, still trembling from the terror of the experience. His eyes met hers. He did not speak. Neither did she, but something passed between them in that moment. Something that words could not capture. She had saved his life, and he knew it. That would change everything. The endurance trials were suspended indefinitely. For 3 days after the rescue, the academy was consumed by investigations and review boards. Officials questioned everyone involved. Medical teams monitored the students who had been trapped. Engineers assessed the structural failure that had caused the flooding. And at the center of everything was a question that nobody could quite answer. What should be done about ECO Yeon's team? Technically, they had violated the rules of the trials. They had deviated from their assigned course. They had abandoned the competition to assist other teams. By every official standard, they should be disqualified. But they had also saved 12 lives. The review board convened on the 4th day. CO Yeon stood before the same 5 instructors who had issued her formal warning months earlier. The same table. The same serious expressions. But this time, the atmosphere was different. We have reviewed the events of the 2nd day, the lead instructor said. His voice was neutral, giving no indication of what decision had been reached. Your team departed from the assigned course at 14:37 hours and proceeded toward the flooded section. You arrived at the scene at 14:52 hours and immediately began rescue operations. Those operations continued for approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes until official rescue teams arrived. He paused. During that time, your team extracted 12 students from life-threatening conditions. 0 fatalities. 0 serious injuries. All 12 students have since recovered fully. ECO-YEON remained silent. She had learned long ago that speaking before being asked was rarely wise. Several instructors believe you should be commended for your actions. The lead instructor continued. Others believe that rules exist for reasons and that exceptions, however well-intentioned, undermine the integrity of our training programs. He leaned forward. We would like to hear from Master Varn before making our final decision. Varn rose from his seat. He moved slowly, his scarred body showing the weight of years and old injuries. When he reached the center of the room, he faced the board directly. I have trained warriors from 17 species over 40 years, he began. His voice was steady, certain. I have seen what fear and desperation bring out in sentient beings. I have seen soldiers abandon their own comrades to save themselves. I have seen entire units collapse when circumstances became difficult. He turned to look at SEO-YEON. What I saw in that flooding section was not desperation. It was doctrine. That human did not save those students because she is exceptional. She saved them because that is what Earthborn are trained to do. They do not leave people behind. It is not a choice they make in the moment. It is fundamental to who they are. He addressed the board again. 30 years ago, during the Boundary Wars, I learned this lesson the hard way. I was an enemy combatant who attacked a mining station defended by 8 humans. We outnumbered them 40-1. We had superior weapons and superior numbers. And yet, when they finally had us defeated, they offered us mercy instead of death. The instructors exchanged glances. This was not widely known history. The sergeant who led that defense was named Yoon Tae-jun. Varn continued. He was this student's grandfather. He taught her the same techniques, the same values, the same grip that the entire academy has mocked for months. He pointed at ECO-YEON. The grip was not designed for elegance. It was designed to hold on when anyone else would have let go. It was designed for a species that evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. And when the moment came, when students were drowning and rescue was too far away, that grip did exactly what it was meant to do. He returned to his seat. If you disqualify her for saving 12 lives, you will be telling every student in this academy that following rules matters more than doing what is right. That is not a lesson I want to teach. The room was silent. The lead instructor looked at his colleagues. Quiet conversations passed between them. Finally, he spoke. This board has reached a decision. He stood. Yoon Seo-yeon. Your team is hereby awarded full completion credit for the endurance trials. Additionally, the Academy will begin an official study of human combat techniques. Going forward, those techniques will be examined and respected rather than corrected. Seo-yeon felt something shift in her chest. Relief, perhaps. Or vindication. Or simply the release of tension that had been building for months. You are dismissed, the instructor said. She bowed and left the room. That evening, a visitor came to her quarters. It was Dreth. He stood in her doorway, his massive form blocking most of the light from the corridor. His expression was difficult to read, but something in his posture had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something more complicated. May I enter? He asked quietly. Seo-yeon stepped aside. Dreth walked into the room and stood awkwardly near the window. He seemed unsure of what to do with his 4 arms. Finally, he turned to face her. What he did next shocked her. He lowered all 4 arms and exposed his throat. Among the Korvathi, this was a gesture of profound respect. It was typically reserved for warriors who had saved one's family line. To perform, it was to acknowledge a debt that could never truly be repaid. I judged your form without understanding your function, Dreth said. His voice was rough, as if the words were difficult to speak. I mocked you. I threatened you. I tried to break you. And when I was drowning, paralyzed by fear, you did not hesitate to save me. He raised his head. I was the one fighting wrong. Not you. Seo-YEO looked at him for a long moment. This was the student who had made her first months at the academy miserable, who had cornered her in the equipment hall, who had reported her to the disciplinary board. But he was also a young man who had just faced his deepest fear and been rescued by someone he had treated badly. I accept your words, she said simply, and I hope we can move forward from here. Dreth nodded. He seemed relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from him. Thank you, he said. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. The grip you use, he said. The one we all laughed at. Can you teach it to me? Seo-yeon allowed herself a small smile. Come to training room 7 tomorrow evening, she said. 2,100 hours. We will start from the beginning. Dreth nodded once and left. Seo-yeon stood alone in her quarters, looking out at the stars. 6 months ago, she had arrived at this station as an outsider with nothing to prove except that she belonged. Now, finally, she was beginning to feel like she did. 6 months later, on a morning bright with artificial sunlight, Yoon Seo-yeon stood among her fellow graduates in the main assembly hall of the Valori Combat Academy. The hall was transformed for the occasion. Banners representing a dozen species hung from the ceiling. Family members and dignitaries filled the observation galleries. The air hummed with anticipation and pride. Seo-yeon wore the formal uniform of a graduate, its fabric crisp and new. On her chest, she carried a distinction that had not existed until the review board created it specifically for her, the mark of exemplary conduct under crisis. It was a small thing, just a simple pin, but it represented everything she had worked for. Her team stood beside her in the formation. Nira, who had once been considered too small and too soft, was being recruited by an interspecies diplomatic security unit. Her ability to navigate tight spaces and her gentle manner had become assets rather than weaknesses. Torek, whose damaged arm had made him invisible among his own people, had been offered a position at a rehabilitation center. He would train injured soldiers, helping them understand that imperfection did not mean inability. Vel, whose different cognitive patterns had been dismissed as slowness, was being pursued by 3 separate tactical analysis divisions. Their pattern recognition abilities had proven invaluable during the rescue and beyond. And then there was Dreth. He stood at the edge of the formation, having specifically requested to be assigned to the same unit as Seo-yeon after graduation. When other Kovathi questioned his decision, he simply said that he had more to learn. The warrior who had once mocked her was now her most dedicated student. The graduation ceremony proceeded with speeches and rituals that varied by species. Each tradition was honored. Each culture represented. When Seo-yeon's name was called, she walked to the stage alone. The academy director, an ancient Brenner, whose stone-gray skin was marked with the patterns of 100 campaigns, presented her with her certification. "You came here as the 3rd human ever admitted," the director said. "You leave as someone who has changed how this academy understands your species. That is no small achievement." Seo-yeon accepted the certification and returned to her place in formation. After the formal ceremony ended, the graduates dispersed to say their goodbyes and prepare for their assignments. Seo-yeon made her way through the crowd, receiving nods of respect from students who had once ignored her, words of encouragement from instructors who had once doubted her. She found Master Vorn waiting near the exit to the old section of the academy. "Walk with me," he said. They walked together through the narrow corridors, past the faded walls and ancient training rooms, until they reached Training Room 7. Vorn entered first. Seo-yeon followed. The room looked the same as it had 6 months ago. The artifacts still lined the walls. The photographs still hung in their places. The history still filled the space like a presence that could almost be felt. Lauren moved to the photograph of the Outpost 17 security detail. He lifted it carefully from the wall and brought it to Seo-yeon. "I want you to have this," he said. Seo-yeon took the photograph with both hands. She looked at the image of a grandfather, young and strong, standing among aliens twice his size with that familiar grip on his weapon. "Why?" she asked. "Because he would want you to have it. And because I have carried it long enough." Seo-yeon turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting she recognized instantly, were words her grandfather had written decades ago. "We fight so others do not have to. We hold on so others can let go." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Varun placed a hand on her shoulder. "He would be proud," he said. "Not because you saved those students during the trials. Any brave person might have done that. He would be proud because you never considered not saving them. It was never a choice for you. It was simply what you had to do." Seo-yeon looked up at the scarred instructor, who had once been an enemy and was now something closer to a mentor. "Thank you," she said. For everything. Varn nodded once and stepped back. Go, he said. Your transport leaves in 2 hours. You have a career ahead of you. SEO-Y. EON left Training Room 7 for the last time. She walked through the academy corridors. That had become familiar over the past year, passing students who were beginning their own journeys, instructors who had shaped hers. At the main entrance, her team was waiting. Ready? Nira asked. Ready, CO Yeon replied. They boarded the transport together, bound for their first assignment, a diplomatic station on the edge of contested space. The work would be difficult. The challenges would be many. But they would face them as they had faced everything else, as a team. 3 weeks later, on that diplomatic station, CEO Yeon was running a routine patrol through the security corridor when she passed a group of new cadets being given an orientation tour. One of them, a young Kavati barely old enough to qualify for service, noticed her weapon and started to laugh. Look at her grip, the cadet whispered to a companion. She's holding it wrong. Before Lee Soo-yeon could respond, an older officer stepped forward. She recognized him immediately. He was one of the students she had pulled from the flooding section during the endurance trials. That is the Earthborn grip, the officer said quietly. If you are smart, you will ask her to teach you. The young cadet fell silent, confusion replacing amusement on his face. Seo Yeon smiled slightly. She adjusted her stance, hands positioned exactly as her grandfather had taught her, and continued her patrol without a word. Behind her, she heard the older officer explaining to the cadets what had happened during the trials. She heard him describing the rescue, the chaos, the human who had refused to leave anyone behind. She did not stay to listen. There was work to do. There was always work to do. That night, alone in her quarters, she took out her grandfather's journal and added a new entry of her own. It was the first time she had ever written in those pages. Grandfather, she wrote, I understand now why you never told me the full story of Outpost 17. Some lessons cannot be taught with words. They have to be lived. She paused, looking at the photograph on her desk. I am carrying your legacy now. The grip you taught me, the values you instilled, the belief that mercy is strength and that holding on matters more than letting go. I will pass these things to others, just as you passed them to me. She closed the journal and placed it beside the photograph. Outside her window, the stars burned in the darkness. Somewhere among them was Earth, the world that had forged her species into something that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. They had mocked her grip technique. They had underestimated her because of where she came from. They had expected her to fail, but she had held on, because that is what Earthborn do. They hold on, and they never, ever let go.